hesitate to go through the sobering statistics. But I think we need to be reminded, probably need to be reminded every single day. There is some good news. There continues to be a little good news in that abortions are on the decline in this country. And of course, we're another year down the road, and so these statistics are always 2 to 3 years old by the time they get it all in and they do the tallying. But this is basically coming from two sources, and it's the sources that I've used for several years, being the Guttmacher, I can't pronounce that institute, and the Centers for Disease Control. Those are the two that seem to be probably the most accurate, the most undisputed, the most unchallenged. Quickly, this is based on state level data. In 2014, 954,000 abortions took place. That was down from 983,000 the year before, and down from a little over a million in 2012. So they are on the decline, but still 954,000. That brings us up to a total of still nearly 53 million legal abortions that have taken place from 73 through 2011. So I don't know if we're getting ready to trip the 54 million mark or not, but that 53 million's been tossed out for 2 or 3 years. I remember that. In 2013, 16.7% of all U.S. pregnancies, excluding miscarriages, ended in abortion. Highest number, of course, occurs in California, 181,000, New York, 138,000, and Florida. For those that care to know, the fewest occurred in Wyoming, 120, South Dakota, 600, and North Dakota, 1,250. Get this, in 2013, approximately 37.4% of all pregnancies in New York City ended in abortion. Over a third of the babies conceived in New York City are aborted. %70% of all legal induced abortions occur in California. Unmarried women account for 85% of all abortions. Of course, women in their 20s accounted for the majority of the abortions in 2013 and had the highest abortion rates. Sobering. 37% of women obtaining abortions identified themselves as Protestant. 28% identified themselves as Catholic. I'll spend just 2 minutes here and then we're going to get into the lesson. You often hear reasons why. Reasons why. And I've got 2 surveys here. One was of 1,209 post-abortive women who took, this was taken from 9 different abortion clinics across the country, providing the reason. And then the state of Florida keeps records. If you have an abortion in the state of Florida, it is mandatory that you have to check a box on a form. Mandatory. So there were 71,000 abortions in Florida in 2015. And get this. You often hear reasons why, and you hear arguments in Congress and the Senate and politicians, and you often hear rape and incest and life of the woman and the health of the woman, blah, blah, blah. Here's the reasons. State of Florida, 72,000 abortions. 0.001% resulted from an incestuous relationship. 0.065, the woman's life was endangered by the pregnancy. 0.085, the woman was raped. 0.288, we're up to almost 0.3%, the woman's physical health was threatened by the pregnancy. 0.294, the woman's psychological health was threatened by the pregnancy. 0.666, there was a serious fetal abnormality. All of those greatly less than 6.2, the woman aborted for social or economic reasons. And there's a box on the check box that they can check that simply says, but they have to check it, no reason. Not that they didn't check any of the boxes, that is a box. No reason. 92% checked that box. You add up all of those supposed reasons, viable reasons there may be for an abortion, it adds up to a little over 1%. Rape, incest, health of the child, health of the mother. But yet, 92%, no reason. Of course, the other studies matches that, except they didn't survey near the people. 8% don't want to be a single mother. 19% done having a baby. 23% can't afford a baby. 25% not ready for a child. 6% other. Even in that small snapshot of 1,200, less than 0.5% said that they were a victim of rape, which is often what you have thrown up in your face when you talk about abortion. Sobering statistics. Every life is important. Turn to Jeremiah chapter 1. The importance of life. How important are you? What has God called you for? Of course, we know Jeremiah referred to as the crying prophet. The writer of this lesson being Sanctity of Life, he took it a different turn. Every life that is conceived is for a purpose. Every life. My life, your life, the life of that aborted child had purpose. There's a reason why. God knew it from the get-go. Before you were ever formed, there was a purpose. And I want you to be prepared to turn over and we may not answer this out loud, but I want you to think about it. And you're quarterly on page 85 here in just a second. And oftentimes we give excuses why we can't do or why we don't want to do what God would call us to do. No different here for Jeremiah. I happen to think that Jeremiah had a pretty good excuse. God didn't think so. And Audrey and Michelle and Irene and Bente will recognize, we started a new study in Good News Club, and it was on Moses. And as you go through the Bible, look at all the men and women that God used in the Bible. That they said, you know what? I'm not qualified to do this. Get somebody else to do this. And we kicked off a study with the Good News Club on basically the escape from Egypt. And, of course, we had to start with talking about Moses. Moses said, God, I can't even talk plain. Get somebody else. And we see that here with Jeremiah. As the nation is in terrible condition and God is getting ready to tell Jeremiah, you're going to bring some bad news. You're going to have to get in these people's faces. Greg's, again, paraphrasing here. You're going to have to sober them up. And whether they listen or not, it's a different story. But I'm telling you, you're going to deliver some bad news. Well, that'd be pretty tough for any of us to do, and we're of age. We're 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years old in this class. Jeremiah was, as he called himself, a child. Then the word of the Lord, this is Jeremiah chapter 1, picking up in verse 4. Then the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. I knew thee. And before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee. And I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. as God speaks to Jeremiah, as God speaks to you. Do you believe that God knew you in your mother's tummy, as Courtney used to say? Do you believe that? Anybody in here that don't believe that? Okay, we're clear on that. Do you believe that you've been sanctified? If you're a child of God, that you've been sanctified? We got any issues with that? Okay, we're clear there. Now, I ordain thee a prophet unto the nations. Do you believe that you've been called for a purpose? Look at your Courtney on page 85. Look at those three questions a third of the way down the page. I knew you before I formed you in the womb. Check. We believe that. I set you apart before you were born. You know you weren't conceived. None of us were conceived. No child has ever been conceived just to take up space on the face of the earth. None of us were made just to be filler. None of us. Each and every one of us have a purpose, and a great purpose, and a purpose that is bigger than ourselves. Think about it and let it soak in. Don't run from it. Don't hide from it. Don't say that I'm done doing what I'm supposed to be done. God is never done with us. As I talked with Tim Carter Wednesday night, he blessed my heart. God's not done with Tim yet. And he's on death's bed. Don't tell me that you retire from doing God's work. You don't. And you better not tell him that. Question 3. It is a question. I ordained you a, and you fill in that blank. This is where God's plan becomes specific for you. I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. That's God's words. That's God speaking to Jeremiah. That's God speaking to you. Now, let's see Jeremiah's response. Let's see our response. Then said I, Jeremiah speaking here, Ah, Lord God. Ah, you see that exclamation point? And then behold, I cannot speak, for I am a child. Then said I, as he's taken aback after what God has just told him. It's almost like he's saying in one breath, no, God. Behold, I cannot speak, for I am a child. And that word meaning very young, very inexperienced, even an infant. The same word is used to describe Moses in that basket floating in the Nile River. Now we know Jeremiah was too big to be put in a basket and floated down the river. So he takes it to the extreme. As he pleads his case, as often we do when we're saying we're not qualified or we're simply not going to do anything. We'll take whatever, however we're trying to sell the situation, and we'll go to the extreme to try to get out of it. No different here for Jeremiah. Except to his defense. How old is Jeremiah here? Anybody's dug through and studied and want to venture? How old do you think Jeremiah was here? Anybody? 17. Anybody else? We don't know, but we got a pretty good idea. In all likelihood, he was somewhere between 18 and 20 years old. A lot of Jewish studies, when you get on their side of things, they said in all likelihood they go to the younger side, said he could have been as young as 14. But most commentaries say that he was late teens, no older than 20. But yet, God has called an 18 to 20-year-old, or if you want to, 14 to 20-year-old, to stand up to a very sinful people and say, woe unto you. God saying that you're going to deliver some bad news. And go back and read the book of Jeremiah. He believed that bad news. He delivered that bad news and cried about it. It moved him. Like I said before, he's called the weeping prophet. Then God said, but the Lord said to me, say not, I am a child. For thou shalt go to all that I shall send thee, and whatsoever I command thee, thou shalt speak. God says, oh no. Don't you tell me how young you are. Don't you give me that excuse. I'm calling you. I'm going to equip you. If God calls us, he will. Not he can, not he might, but he will equip us. And certainly that's what he's saying here. Shalt go to all that I shall send thee, and whatsoever I command thee, thou shalt speak. Be not afraid of their faces, for I am with thee to deliver thee, saith the Lord. Wow. Jeremiah, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 years old. Obedient. Folks, he was just a young man. At the end of the day, he's just a young man. An obedient young man. He's not some extraordinary, highly educated, capable person. No. Go through the Bible. Go through the Bible. Abraham, Moses, David. I just quickly wrote down this morning, Job, Daniel, Paul, the disciples, everybody that God called. They were just somebody. Of course, we know in the example of Paul, who was Saul, very highly educated, but look what he did with him. Most people in Saul's shape, being as educated as he was, as convicted as he was to persecute Christians, to kill Christians, to make sure Christianity died in his tracks, was a leader of that in the world at the time. Had he met Jesus, a lot of people would have said, I'd just soon die. Because there's no way I can face and go back and do what you're asking me to do. But God. And wrapping up, continuing in 9 and 10, then the Lord put forth his hand and touched my mouth. And the Lord said to me, behold, I have put my words in thy mouth. I'm going to tell you what to say. See, I have set thee over the nations and over the kingdoms to root out and to pull down and to destroy and to throw down, to build and to plant. Can you imagine Jeremiah's heart pounding in his chest right here as God tells him to root out and to pull down and to destroy and to throw down and then to build and to plant? Young teenager, 20-year-old top. Here's what you're going to do. Folks, we all have purpose. Every child that was aborted this past year, every child that will be aborted tomorrow, and every day after that, had great purpose. Now we know that this whole world's got a problem called sin. And we know that we see a lot of horrible stuff taking place in this world today. But God. But God. If we are obedient to God and follow His way and not our way, what kind of difference could we make in this world? If our politicians, many new ones, will be sworn in and taking office in Washington in the coming week, what a difference they can make for those of them that truly call themselves Christians if they would say, okay, I'm going to stick to what I said during campaign time. And instead of talking about Christian values, I'm going to forsake my pocketbook. I'm going to forsake the reputation, maybe that I have promised to the other side, and I'm going to do what God would have me to do. Until that happens, in 4 more years, on Sanctity of Life Sunday, you will have a speaker in front of you, be giving you statistics, and we'll be up to 54 or 55 million abortions. But between now and then, you go back to page 85 in your student quarterly, and you read those 3 statements, and you ask yourself simply this: am I doing what God has set me apart from the time I was conceived to do? And don't say you don't know. By this point in your life, you know. And if you don't know, if you think God's changed it up, ask Him. He'll tell you. Again, I don't apologize for this statement. God made none of us to be filler. We're here for a purpose. I love y'all. And as I continue to say, and as God commands, you love each other. Heavenly Father, Lord, praying for the mothers, Lord God, that may be contemplating an abortion. Praying for those, Lord God, that in times past that they're tormented because of an abortion. God, you forgive. But God, there is a price to be paid. And God, I believe our nation is paying the price today. Just as Jeremiah warned, there's a time coming when God's not going to turn His back anymore. How long are we going to kick the can down the road? Forgive this nation. Forgive me for my shortfalls and my errors and my sins, Lord. And thank you for the one that died to forgive all sins. And in His name, Jesus, amen.